Well, hi everyone, it's Marcus and welcome to more Zooming in the Jungle Room. I have got a total legend of the industry with me today. He is Steve Hughes and he's coming to Adelaide very soon. We're going to get onto that in a minute. Steve, how are you?
Good, brother. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. So first time touring with your show, Steve Hughes Live, in 5 years. You're looking forward to getting back around?
I certainly am. I went to the UK in 2020 to do a tour for about 3 or 4 months, and then you know what happened then.
Yeah.
They decided to shut the world. Yep. And, so I ended up staying there for about nearly 4 years.
Crazy. And so this tour that you're doing now, Steve Hughes Live, is it going to be going all around Australia?
Is that the interesting title they've given my show?
That's the official title, Steve Hughes Live. Could you imagine the opposite? It wouldn't be that great.
No, Steve Hughes is dead.
Live. Steve Hughes is dead. Look, Steve, look, put me in the show. I'm half.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go back to the beginning before we start talking about the show. You were born in Sydney and relocated to England, obviously, in the early 2000s. But I don't know if everyone knows this, but if they're fans, they probably will. You started off as a heavy metal drummer, the first thrash metal band, essentially in Australia at the time, with Slaughter Lord, then Mortal Sin, and then, correct me if I'm wrong when I pronounce this, Nazul.
Nazul, that's correct. Yeah.
Oh, look at me getting my words right. So yeah, how was that period of your time, being the drummer in those bands?
Well, that was a brilliant time for heavy metal because, thrash metal had just started. So we were there from day dot, really. I'd gotten into metal through Iron Maiden, 82. It was a brilliant time for heavy metal because, the new wave of British heavy metal had just hit with Maiden, getting big on Number of the Beast, Screaming for Vengeance for Judas Priest, Blackout for Scorpions, German, but, that kind of style. And a lot of people got into metal through those bands at that time. And I'd like that stuff. But I always wanted something. And plus, at that time, you had a lot of Motley Crue coming out, which I liked, early Motley Crue. So you had that whole LA scene sort of starting with your Rats and your Dockins and your Motley Crues and all that. And then you got your new wave of British heavy metal. So you got your Priests and your Saxons and the Accept from Germany, Scorpions from Germany, a lot of more underground new wave of British heavy metal bands, Angel Witch and all that stuff. And then Dio, Sabbath had come in the 80s with the Dio records. And Dio made those solo albums. Wasp was coming out, all that kind of stuff. It was a great time. And then, Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax hit, Megadeth, then the German stuff, Creator, Sodom, Destruction. Plus you had Merciful Fate, Denmark, Celtic Frost, Switzerland, all so that underground. And that's the stuff that bang appealed to me. I liked metal, but as soon as I heard that stuff, I was like, this is what I've been looking for, ultra brutal, heavy. And so then, and we'd already started to form bands because I was just obsessed, and I was tape trading and stuff, which is, we were in the Blue Mountains, kind of 100 kilometres out of Sydney. So it was kind of, but we were lucky enough. I went to school with Mick Burke, who was the guitarist in Slaughter Lord and Mortal Sin. So I made a band with him, and then we found our singer, Tony, through a friend of mine. And then we also knew a couple of these guitarists who were just shredders, just lived up the road. We all lived 5 minutes from each other. We were kind of lucky for living in such a small town to know these heavy metal guys. We formed a band. And then about 83, we went and saw 83, 84, we saw it was either Motorhead or Def Leppard at Salinas, which used to be a venue in Coogee Beach. And that's where we kind of met Wayne Campbell, who was the original drummer of Mortal Sin. We met guys like Paul Murphy, who's been the manager of Utopia Records, Import Records, for about 30 years. He was so we started to get together and jam with those guys. Joe Buttigieg, he played in Mortal Sin for a bit. So did Mick Sultana, who was in, because they formed a band called Addictive. And so we kind of, it was sort of like the western suburbs, Blue Mountains kind of met. We all started to just create that scene, really. Mortal Sin, Slaughter Lord. We even ended up rehearsing at the same studio. It was ridiculous. We didn't even know. We didn't have a studio. We were in the Blue Mountains. We came down. We found a studio kind of about in the western suburbs, and Mortal Sin went there. We're like, well, this is great timing. Everything just kind of fell into place then. And it was such an exciting time because the thrash metal was underground. new, vibrant. It's nothing like being at the beginning of a scene. And I was just determined we're going to play this fast, and so we were far more extreme than Mortal Sin. Slaughter Lord had gone into the kind of creator destruction sort of Slayer route, and unfortunately that it didn't last too long. Slaughter Lord, I mean, I made the demo, and of course I tape traded a lot, so it got out because, interestingly enough, that's when fanzines kind of started. Your fan-made magazines, photocopied and so forth, and then it was because Australia was so depressing being in Australia in the sense that it was so isolated, as you know, if you're into different stuff, and then. But what was good was because, we weren't great musicians then, and we were, like a lot of early thrash stuff, just playing to our absolute limits and got no money. We're on the dole, we're making demos in people's garages and stuff. But the good thing about the tape trading scene and the fanzine scene was that we could now send demos to people in like Sweden or South America, Canada. Because if we'd sent demos to like mainstream mags in England, like Kerrang or stuff like that, they would probably just would have thrown it in the bin.
Totally.
Because even they weren't into the underground then. Because, obviously those mags that had come out of the late 70s into the 80s were run by older guys who'd probably grown up with Sabbath, Scorpions, Uriah Heep, hard rock. So even the mainstream metal mags sort of dismissed thrash metal at the time, as a kind of fad that would be just done by a bunch of upstarts.
So, Steve, how involved are you in the music industry now?
Well, I think if you can speak to any, I mean, I've not been in major successful bands, but if you look at people in successful bands now, they probably say there isn't a music industry left.
Yeah.
But I'm still making records. I'm staying at my friend's house at the moment. He plays guitar, and we were playing guitar last night. And if I'm honest, can I be honest? If I'm honest, I'd much prefer to be in a band than be a comedian.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that's what I started with.
Yeah.
I like music. Music's comedy's great. I was lucky enough to be, get good at it. But to me, music's my first love, and it's a more dynamic form of expression. Comedy is jokes, laugh, jokes, laugh, jokes. There's different styles of comedy, obviously, sort of surreal comedy and sort of, just mainstream comedy and then sort of more what I do, that kind of outspoken comedy like Bill Hicks and all this. But still, music is it's a more colourful dynamic, really. You can express brutality or sensitivity or emotion or mood or,
that is precious.
People get married to songs they love. They don't get married to jokes they love.
They get offended by jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been really quite diverse. I mean, you've had a TV career. You're an actor as well. You've been on many shows, Spicks and Specks, Good News Week, MTV Australia, but also films you've done as well, zombie movies, which is totally my favorite.
I wouldn't say I'm an actor. I've done a couple of small parts, and I probably could act. If I'm honest. I'm no Laurence Olivier, but I'm.
Meryl.
I think you go.
Obviously comedy as well, being a comedian. So, I mean, that's really quite diverse. I mean, all arts and entertainment, naturally, but, it's really quite a diverse kind of career. Was that a natural progression for you, going from the music to the TV, to the film, to the stage?
Well, the comedy, I guess, I was always kind of a funny guy in the sense of, not at school or anything. I wasn't the class clown or anything, but I could always do characters and, and in the late 80s, we were, or even before mid 80s, I mean, who doesn't like laughing, really? So when we grew up, you saw Billy Connolly and stuff like this and comedies and, And we used to listen to these Bill Cosby records. I remember one day at my buddy's house listening to Exodus and Slayer and then Bill Cosby records, So maybe there was an early incarnation of it. And then when in the late 80s, I remember we lived in this group house with all musos. And we were getting into those Eddie Murphy DVDs when they first came out. They were Delirious and what's the other one? I can't remember the name of the other one.
I remember.
And the Richard Pryor.
Yep.
Live on Sunset, and Steve Martin, live at the Hollywood Bowl. And we had these VHS tapes. And so it was funny. We were all, parties on the weekend, metal and work during the week. And then, we'd watch these comedy DVDs. And so then in the late 80s, I kind of distanced myself from heavy metal for a while. It's because I've been so intense. I wasn't one of these guys that was, once I got into thrash metal, I was completely into thrash. That was it, kind of, I even separated my traditional metal records from the thrash ones, it was like, so by the late 80s, I started to get interested in other music. And I formed a band called Presto, which no one even knows about, for like 5 years, longest band I've been in, made 2 records. And you couldn't even find it on Google. It's so ridiculous. And then probably around 94, that's when I joined Azul. But I also realized that, and I was getting older, I'm in my mid-20s now, getting into the late 20s or late 20s. And I just realized that, bands they're difficult. One, they're difficult to get to success in a country like this. And 2, you're at the mercy of the other members. When I was in Presto, we were in that band for 5 years. We did hundreds of gigs, made 2 albums, and then the singer decides he wants to get married and not do this.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. You're like, we just spent 5 years doing this, right? And so that's what I realized. I'm at the mercy of other people now. I mean, you always are, but then I realized, now I'm not 18 anymore. So we've been watching, and I don't know why I thought I could do comedy. Maybe it's from all that stuff we used to watch, and I thought maybe I could try stand-up. So I went and did some drama courses, improvisation courses and stuff like this, just to get used to being on stage without a drum kit. And then around 95, probably, I just I did it. I mean, it's a difficult one to start comedy, because like a band, you can practice and you do a gig, whereas comedy's like surfing. You can't practice unless you get in the, most sports you can practice, but surfing, if you want to start, where do you start? In the ocean.
Yeah.
You can't start in a bath or on a lake. You have to start where in the ocean, where you can't do it yet. It's what comedy's like. You have to start in front of an audience, and you've never done it. And so that's why it's difficult to start, because you're like, this is going to be brutal if it isn't. But funny enough, the comedy gods, I think, as I call them, anyone who's got the balls to try stand-up comedy, sometimes they let your first gig go all right.
Yep.
You go, oh my God, it's got a few chuckles, a few laughs, didn't know it booed or threw stuff. The second one, they might let you go all right. And then they test you. Let's see if they're going to keep going. Then they give you the death. And they give you the, right. That's the test gig to see if they're going to keep going. After a room full of strangers stare at them and hate them.
Steve, do you remember your first stand-up?
Yeah, it was at the Sydney Comedy Store, which used to be on Parramatta Road, which was a main sort of road out of the CBD into the western suburbs. And it used to be on the corner of Crystal Street, Parramatta Road. And it's funny because I was lucky. Carl Barron was there.
Oh, wow.
He became big. Kitty Flanagan, who's now on the TV and does those shows, she was there starting out. Yeah. Who else was around there? Joe Avardi, he's still going. He's an Italian fella. It's Tahir, he gets around. He was there. It was a good bunch of guys to start with, really, guys who kept going,
A great.
I remember the first gig because my buddy, who I'd known from the Blue Mountains, who was an animator.
Yep.
He did the Slaughter Lord demo cover. He'd worked in Asia for years for Hanna-Barbera doing cartoons.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's huge.
And he came back and we were living in Strathfield for a bit. And I thought, I want to do comedy. He came back for a holiday for a while because he was living in China or somewhere in Japan. And I said, listen, I've got an idea. I said, I want to try this stand-up comedy. I said, if I ring them today, a open mic night, and they say, yes, you can come on. I said, will you come to the gig with me? And he went, yeah, I'll come to you. Right. So I rang him and they went, yeah, spot, starts 8:30, put your name down. Yeah, oh, shit. So because he said he'd come, that was my kind of, if you come, I have to do it. So,
yep.
Which is funny enough, because when I first moved to Ireland overseas, he was still doing animation and he was working in Asia, and he worked with this Irish fella, and they were going to have a holiday together. And he goes, I'm going to go to Ireland. I said, so am I. and then he was actually at my first gig in overseas as well.
Wow, I love.
It's
Now,
so
fast
bizarre. It's
forward
cool.
right up to now. Obviously, you are doing the tour. It's coming to the Rhino Room in Adelaide, which is an iconic place. I know that you've played there many times, including the original Rhino Room back in the day. Thursday, the 16th of May, 2024, which is just 2 weeks away. What can we expect from the new show this time around? Which is, you know, like I said, 5 years since you've been touring.
Well, if anybody watching this is not really a tour. I'm going to do I've got to go to the UK in about 3 weeks. So I'm going to do a tour there, and then I'm coming back. Then we're going to do a tour. Okay. I was just lucky enough that Craig offered me a spot, so I thought, yeah, I'll get that down before I go to the UK. Then we're going to come back and set up a proper tour because I want to get out to some more regional areas.
Yeah.
Because I've always done these big. I was doing big theatres before, but now that I've sort of, you know, got more controversial all my agents loved me when I was controversial before. Being controversial was controversial. So I don't have these big agents anymore, and I've got a new agent. He's a great guy and great. He's a great agent, but I used to be managed by the guys who run the Comedy Store in Sydney, and in London the woman who worked at the Comedy Store in London. Then I went to Europe and did a tour there, and then got dumped by my agent there because it was too controversial. Yeah. So
what can we expect?
What can we expect from? Well, don't come if you're woke.
In fact, Steve, don't even step out the front door. Don't step out the front door if you're woke. Stay home. Well, do you find being a comedian these days, is it hard because of the whole cancel culture, etc.? Does it make life a little bit more difficult?
It does make life more difficult because obviously the clubs give in to them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, my managers gave in to them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, not that I particularly want to be in the clubs. And besides the controversial stuff, and of course, this is an agenda I was talking about 15 years ago. I told you when they were going to start, you know, you could be done for hate speech, but for offending someone. What are you talking about offending someone? We've already got laws if you abuse, if you not abuse, if you are, you know, assault someone or you know, but offend.
Yeah.
Like, it's being offended is a subjective experience. So how could you have an objective law around a subjective experience? Especially right? Because the person who accuses you of being offended can't prove they were offended.
Yeah.
There's no dead body or broken into house. There's no stolen car. There's them going, I feel like this, and then okay, bring the proof. Like, you can't bring any proof.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's mind control, and it's dangerous as fuck. So and besides all the controversy and the agendas of, you know, really creepy tyrannical laws, it's boring.
Yep.
It's boring because comedy. See, they make these things that they go, well, what gives these comedians the right to do all these homophobic or misogynistic jokes and all that? See, they just say that on the news, right? Okay, who are these comedians? Because I was in the comedy industry for 25 years. Who are these comedians doing overtly racist, sexist, homophobic jokes? You just say they are, but they're not.
Yeah.
That's no one's strategy for a career. Maybe I'll go out there and I'll spill my guts on my inner ignorance and hatred, right? To see if it. I was gigging with black guys and black chicks and Muslim chicks and gay guys and lesbians and poor guys from council estates and rich blokes from posh houses. What? And if you were funny back in the old day, like when people like me and you grew up, and back in the days of reality, you got jobs if you were good at them.
Yep, definitely.
You didn't, you didn't get jobs because, well, we better fill a quota to make sure that it's not right. No, that doesn't work.
100%, Steve.
yeah, right. So it's like, so back in the day, so no one's going to try and convince me that these comedians were doing these racist, sexist jokes. I was there.
Yeah.
And if a joke, you know, you can't, of course, police how anyone is going to interpret something.
Yeah.
Right. But to just a more automatic and of course comedy, they always do this thing like, well, you can't hit down as if because they use this word minorities, don't they? And then they make out, without even spelling it out, but it gets into people's brains because it's such propaganda, that they seem to think now that everyone that's in a minority is somehow having a hard time.
Yeah, yeah.
Who said they're having a hard time?
Exactly.
I mean, look at the way you're dressed. Look at the way I used to be when I was a metalhead. We're in a minority.
Yep.
And sometimes you have a rougher ride.
Yep. Totally.
Because you've chosen to be an outlier, right?
But
because
Steve,
you stand out from the fucking mainstream, right? And then people go, well, why should I look at any differently? Well, if you opened a dozen eggs and one of them was in the shape of a cube, you'd look at it differently.
Yeah. Yep.
Why? Because it's an anomaly.
You need to write a book.
Now, most mainstream people don't look like you. So when you wander around like that, then of course you'll get some stares, you'll get some this, you'll get some that. But that used to be what drove us.
Yeah.
That's what we liked. We don't want to join the majority.
No, do it more. Be unique. You need to write a book on life, Steve. You need to write a book. That's your next job. That's your next career, a writer.
And also, what's so funny is it, because they use these words, acceptance. Or, you know, you're an outlier now, you're gay, or you're this, or you're an immigrant or something. So you're in a minority, so you need to be brought into the fold, right? Because to be accepted. But now this is the trick. Because why do you want to be brought into the fold of the mainstream? This is why punks and that were walking around like this. Why? So we got discriminated against.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to be in the mainstream. Of course, everyone's involved in society to a degree. You flush the toilet, you live in a house, you have electricity, you need some cash, you go to the supermarket. We're all involved, right? But the majority of the people are mainstream. And what's the mainstream have to offer you? 9-to-5 jobs, tax, steal your pension, death. Right.
Oh my goodness. We are almost out of time because I'm getting my warning. But hey, like we said, the Rhino Room, Thursday, 16th of May.
Well, it's going to be a great show. I don't know who's supporting me. Craig will probably pull in some local acts. If it's a great crowd, you'll get money. You'll get value for money because it'll be a long show. I love being on stage.
Maybe your encore could be bringing out a drum kit and giving us a bit of
yeah.
Bean beans. I'm there.
Well, that was the great thing about becoming a comedian. There was no lugging that drum kit around.
Hey, Steve, sign off by telling us why people should come out and see your show.
Well, because a lot of comedy is very bland these days, and it doesn't hit hard. And comedy that hits hard is not offensive. Life can be very dark. The world is in dualism. You have light, you have dark, you have up, you have down. You live in this. This is a reality. So when people go, I'm non-binary, you're going against the laws of nature. You're not. You're in duality. Ask a Buddhist what duality is, right? There's male, female, right? So there's light and there's dark. Jung or Freud will tell you you've got a dark side, a shadow side. Life is tough. So the darkness needs to be tempered with what? Laughing at it. So when these people want to cancel comedians on it, you don't understand. You're doing something that's overtly against nature and very highly dangerous for the psychological welfare of individuals and society as a whole.
Yep.
Why do you think people in Belfast in Ireland have a great sense of humour? One, they're Irish. Two, they've been through the shit. And if they didn't laugh at that, they'd go mental. So that's why you should come and see the show, to watch some proper old school good comedy that hits deep and it's got good jokes with punchlines.
I absolutely love it, Steve. I'm coming, and you know what? After the show, we're going to go out and have a couple of bevies. Because
all right.
Seriously, your stories, you've got so much to say. I could actually do this interview with you for a good couple of hours, but we don't have that kind of time. But you are a total legend.
It'd be good to meet you, brother.
Oh, you know what? 100%. I will be there. But yeah, you've got a great outlook in life, and you've got so much stuff to bring to the community and society, and I love that. Don't change a thing.
Well, how will I recognize you on the night?
Oh, Steve Hughes, everyone. He is playing at the Rhino Room Thursday, the 16th of May, 2024. Just a short couple of weeks away. You can get your tickets through the Rhino Room.
Yeah, come on down, folks. It's going to be great fun.
I cannot wait to meet you. Thank you for your time today. Happy Saturday.
No worries, brother.
See you in a couple of weeks in Adelaide.
All right. Peace, man.